Welcome to Beyond Longevity, the podcast that explores not just how we age, but how we can build a longer, healthier future for ourselves. This is a Beyond Longevity mini-series of interviews recorded at the 2026 ViVE conference in Los Angeles, one of the most influential gatherings in digital health, created by Health and Chime, and exactly the kind of forum that shapes the future of healthcare, which makes this a particularly fitting conversation for Beyond Longevity, especially as health is a supporter of this podcast. My guest today on Beyond Longevity is Brooke Hay from BioAro, a company trying to bring a lot of different pieces of the longevity puzzle together under one roof. Recorded live at ViVE, this conversation looks at BioAro's attempt to connect genetic, microbiome testing, biomarkers, AI analysis, and supplementation into one joined-up system. The idea is ambitious but clear. If you want to understand why someone is thriving, struggling, or moving towards disease, you cannot look at one test in isolation. You have to look at the whole picture. But the conversation also goes somewhere even more important. Because once you start collecting deeply personal health data, the question is not just what you can learn from it. It is who controls it, how safely is it stored, and whether the individual truly stays in charge. Brooke explains BioAro's focus on privacy, consent, and decentralized data storage, and the difficult balance between advancing research and protecting the person behind the data. This is a conversation about prevention, personalization, and what it takes to make health data useful without losing sight of the human being it belongs to. Hi, thank you so much for joining me on Beyond Longevity. We're at the ViVE event. Tell us a little bit about why you're here, what you do, and what you're trying to achieve.
BioAro, we are at our core a genomics company, but we've become very enthusiastic with the longevity and wellness scene in recent years. And we decided to do something a little bit different than what some other longevity companies have done. Is in our new service, BioLongevity, unlike other longevity apps, we introduce genomics as the underlying core of it. So not only are you getting catered advice based on your own wearables, your own health data, your own BPM, actually having that cross-referenced with all clinically relevant gene variants and performance relevant gene variants, both on an athletic and on a health general level. In addition, we actually produce bioactive supplements. They were initially released in the UAE with great response, and we've actually added those to the BioLongevity plan in order to send those to you monthly based on who you are. There are creatine packets specific for women that are a part of that. We have Longevity Plus and creatine packets as well for people who need more cognitive assistance with heavy cognitive loads. Or we have creatine complex packets for individuals with more physical loads in their life. And of course, on our longevity stack, that also includes your omega-3 compositions. So we've decided to combine your genomics, your bioactive supplements with your typical longevity app experience. It still has the regular drink water, when to go to your sleep tracker, all that stuff. And the last thing I would like to mention is our microbiome testing as well. We have gut microbiome testing, so that can also be cross-referenced on your app. You can understand where you need to be getting more specific nutrients from certain foods, what you're missing. Based on the analysis of microbiota, it can actually tell you're missing complex carbs from these vegetables. You're missing fermented foods. You're missing this or that, or perhaps you're in excess of certain things. That will cause certain microbiota to dominate your microbiome. In addition, for women specifically, we have vaginal microbiome. So that can be integrated into the service if needed. So we really want to come in as all in one. We've launched in UAE and we are now very active in the US, officially launched in the US.
Fantastic.
For the listeners that are not too sure what genomics actually is and how you test it, can you just elaborate a little bit?
Absolutely. So for the public, you might think of genomics as ancestry.com from 20 years ago or ancestry genomics. And the truth is that really is just the tip of the iceberg, is taking a DNA test and figuring out for your parents, or figuring out your 40% of this ethnicity and that. But what we've found in recent years, in the last 15 years, is that there is a deep depth to that iceberg in regards to your health, medicine, and wellness goals. So there's a wide variety of genes. We could start in the cardiovascular area, where you actually might be less inclined for endurance based on your DNA. You might be a high risk of cardiovascular failure based on your DNA. You might respond to some drugs more properly than others based on your DNA. In fact, you might actually respond to some supplements more prominently than others based on your DNA. So that's really what Longevity is doing, is taking your general health data and advice, but also taking into account that one great area is nutrigenomics. So there is actually a genetic aspect to your specific nutritional needs. So we're not going to give you a general nutritional guideline based on your gender and height and age. Although that is relatively specific, we can go even further and say, based on your nutrigenomics, or your genes related to your digestion and metabolism, actually, these are a little bit more specific. So this is really getting that deeper resolution. Your DNA creates every protein molecule that makes up most of the molecules in each of the cells in your entire body. It's really your blueprint. So it's the deepest type of analysis that impacts everything downstream of itself.
Aren't you afraid when people hear that their genes are being tested, that they then either say, oh, these are my genes and that's what it is, nothing I can do about it, or that they're worried that this might, with AI and all this new technology, just becomes available for everybody? For example, the insurances will get a hold of it, increase their insurance premium, things like that.
Yeah, those are absolutely valid concerns in general. It's a great question. When BioAro was established, that was really one of the core pillars that we had to ask ourselves. How are we going to do this in a way that is safe for everyone and provides the most beneficence? It is the age of DNA. It is the age of the genome. It's going to happen. And how do we do it as responsibly as possible? There were issues in the past with 23andMe, the famous controversies. So what we actually deployed was Vatra, which is a decentralized blockchain data storage technique that we developed in-house. So essentially your DNA is split up into chunks, encrypted in blockchain, and stored in different servers in various chunks all over the world. So even if one data center is compromised at some point for any reason, we're going to get an encrypted chunk of your genome that is not even complete and is not even easy to identify with you. I don't know if there's more than a dozen people on the planet who would even be capable of compromising such a system. So absolute great question. It's one of the key questions when we developed the company. And people deserve to feel safe with their data. People deserve to have access to it and know that it's not going to affect your insurance. It's not going to affect your financial life. It's not going to be used against you by anyone in a different company, policy, country, any way, shape, or form. And to address the other concern that's very valid as well is psychological impact of a DNA evaluation, a genetic evaluation. It is true. You might get news that is concerning. And our view on that is it is always good to be ahead of any storm that might come to you. I actually had a great talk with another individual at ViVE earlier today where he said to me that you can't control Mother Nature, but you can control the human spirit and what you do about it. And we weren't even talking about genetics, but I really felt that for what we do at BioAro. Especially with our performance services, like we're launching the BioSport in the near future. It's specifically tailored to sports genomics and athletes. You might get some data that indicates that you're going to struggle in some ways. Maybe your muscle fibers aren't hypertrophic or in tuned to growth. That doesn't mean that you can't engage in certain sports or bodybuilding or weightlifting. It doesn't mean that you have to despair and say, oh, I'm at a high risk of cardiovascular disease in my 50s. I'm afraid I might not live long. What it empowers you to do is to take that into account and take actions ahead of time to prevent those issues. So a great example is cardiovascular conditions. If you know that you're a very high risk, you can actually take those steps to prevent that. Cut drinking by the time you're 40, improve your diet, your lifestyle factors. You can get actually for cancer risk, you can take more thorough exams earlier in life because it's more likely that they might spot something. So you can be prepared. When it comes to performance, if you see that you might be struggling in certain ways, you can still try your best and absolutely train as hard as you can and go for it. But where it helps is if you're not getting the same results that other people are getting, you don't feel like it's your fault. You understand that there's a nature side to everything.
Do you also test the methylation pathways?
That is actually what we are validating right now in our laboratory. There's a lot of great companies and laboratories worldwide that work on methylation. Currently, we have a telomere length test. So based on literature, you can get a biological age number based on telomere length. I will say that is a bit superficial in a sense, but it's still a good general idea of how your biological age is. You're right to imply that methylation is really the deep foundation of molecular aging. And so we're actually quite close to having that fully validated and available from our BioAro laboratory.
That's fantastic. Now, who do you see as your direct customer?
That is a conversation we had internally. And that's actually why we separated our Longevity app from our soon to be released BioSport service. So the BioSport is a program that is more focused on physical training, fitness, injury prevention through using your genetic data to give you personalized limits on strenuous activity, as well as specific dietary restrictions and considerations for athletes. So it's more accommodating that. So we target athletes, especially aspiring athletes in their teenage years. We have a special price for youths in the BioSport program that's going to be released in the next month or so. And Longevity, it is a premium product and service that the core service is around $350 a month. And with that, you get your genetic testing, you get biomarker testing, you get supplements sent to you. You do get a lot of bang for your buck, but it is really for the longevity and wellness community, the people who are particularly capable of really focusing on that and committing their time and energy to that. We do care about longevity and wellness for everybody, but we are still working on scaling the genetic testing aspect to make it affordable for everyone. I will say as an aside, however, that if anyone wants their DNA tested and doesn't have the budget to subscribe to such a monthly cost, you can also just go to BioAro directly, and it's about $700 USD to get your whole genome sequenced. And I think for anyone who is considering making an investment on the future of their health, it's a great place to start. It's a once in a lifetime, your whole genome sequence. So really, it's the longevity and wellness space, enthusiasts especially. In fact, our elite package is $1,000 a month. So that's for the people who are really serious about this, who want their biomarkers, their inflammatory markers, their hormones or steroids tested bi-monthly, who want their gut microbiome 2 or 3 times a year, who want genetic reanalysis against new literature yearly, just to keep updated on everything. So yeah, we are definitely moving into that area, but we are also in a B2B availability as well. So in fact, at ViVE, we've met multiple health and wellness organizations who actually are considering using longevity as a proxy for them because they don't have as much testing as we have. So we're also seeking B2B partnerships.
You mentioned investors having approached you at ViVE. Who are you looking for as an investor?
That's a great question. We have experts at the leadership position already. I know some investment firms come in with their own experts and their own development team, and then it becomes a partnership. But really at this point, it is just capital. The Biolongevity service itself is new. We've developed a very robust program, and we are just looking to expand it. And really what it is right now is the marketing budget, a little bit more tech development, but mostly just getting it out to customers, especially any app or service that targets a community, general customers. There's a lot of spend that is involved in the social media, the commercials, celebrity partnerships, things like that. That is what we're seeking Series A funding for. The technology is there. It's really just, let's get it to the people now.
So you do genomic testing, gut testing.
Yeah.
What do you see as the most important biomarker in determining age?
In determining age.
Or longevity? What
Yeah.
are the most important biomarker with regards to longevity?
Yeah, great question. It can be very controversial. I'm sure there's many different opinions on it. Excited to throw my hat into that. If you had to pick one, and this is the big disclaimer, if it shouldn't be one, but if it had to be one, I think telomere length is a really good way to go.
How often should you retest telomere length?
So it depends on how committed you are, but I think for most people, once every few years is fine. I'm also being respectful of someone's budget and someone's time. Telomere test is actually a lot more affordable than a lot of genetic type tests. It's usually about $270 US, $280 US for telomere length. But yeah, once every 2 or 3 years is definitely suitable just as a cross section of how am I doing molecularly. If you're someone who's very committed to longevity, then once per year, I can see that also having value.
What products do you have in your repertoire, especially targeting telomeres? I do know sort of the peptide here. Epitan is a big one.
Yeah, we don't have any compounds that specifically target telomeres in a direct sense, but we have Longevity Plus, which is our bioactive composition of NMN, coenzyme Q10, curcumin, D4B12, as well as a couple of other compounds, and that will indirectly support the prevention of telomere shortening.
That's interesting. Let me dig a little bit deeper into this one. If you don't have a product that directly targets the shortening of telomeres, why would I even want to test it? If I test it once, and I know the status of my telomeres, what can I do? What product can you give me to make the test in a year or 2 years different?
I see what you're saying. I guess I should clarify. I have a molecular biology background. So when we say directly, what I mean is, does the compound directly go to that structure and perform that directly? Longevity Plus, in that sense, will not go to it directly. However, it will improve the health of your cells, such as it will directly impact your telomere length. So pardon me for that. But yes, my scientific background is deeply seated inside me. But in more of a layman term, yes, it directly assists with your telomere length. But what it does is it does that through indirect actions within your cells. And by maintaining cellular health, preventing the prevalence of reactive oxygen species in your cells, that's how it prevents the further shortening of telomere length. Not directly it's a drug that specifically does that, but it cleans up your cells and prevents the shortening further.
So just to be clear, so your Longevity Plus supplement does not elongate the telomeres. It just stops the shortening of them or slows it down. Is that correct?
That is correct, because there are few to any compounds that exist that can lengthen telomeres. I can definitely say that although Longevity Plus cannot extend your telomeres, there is also, not that I know of, anything on the market that can either. When it comes to telomere length, it's about preventing the shortening of them further. This is a good point to illustrate to everyone listening today that telomeres, when you're born, they're very long. They're at the end of your chromosomes. Every time your cells replicate, based on your cellular health in that moment, your telomeres will shorten a certain degree of nucleotides. So if you are living an unhealthy lifestyle, you have a lot of reactive oxygen species, you have a lot of toxic compounds left in your cells, that shortening will be greater or lower depending on your cellular health. So when we're talking about Longevity Plus, improving your cellular health such that your telomeres do not shorten further is the critical point. Although there is some science being put into the lengthening of telomeres, it's not really something any product can confidently offer right now. Yeah, that's a great point. When we're talking about telomere length, in that regard, you can't really reverse your age, but you can prevent further aging. And Longevity Plus is the one and all to go for bioactive supplements, not counting pharmaceutical grade drugs. But we are interested in that in the future.
Now, I'm very happy you made that clear, because I think it's very important for people to know and to understand what is currently possible and what isn't, because there's a lot of talk about longevity and supplements and miracle drugs.
Yes.
And I think it's very important to be very straight and clear what at this moment is possible and what isn't. But looking into the future, what do you see as becoming possible in the near future, the next, let's say, 5 years or even 10 years?
There is a lot of current interest, activity, and research into telomere lengthening. However, as someone who has a background in drug discovery, the discovery cycle for compound medications is long and arduous. Actual molecular telomere lengthening, that could be 10 or 20 years. It could be further. It's really hard to say. Sometimes you think you're really close to a key compound and then you're a few decades out. Sometimes you just fall on it. The drug discovery field is hard to predict sometimes. But what I do see is the further implementation of supplements, drugs, and treatments that are personalized to you based on your DNA and based on your personal needs. So this is something that Longevity, we talk about often, considering our sort of phase 4 and 5 far in the distant future, right? Not our current priorities, but we're looking at the ideas of maybe developing drug compounds or supplement compounds for an individual person based on their individual molecular dynamics. Now, that is nothing that I'm promising in the next few years, but in the spirit of that question of what can we expect in 2040, in 2035, that's something you might start hearing about more, is personalized compound development, where you're actually getting molecules for your longevity based on your DNA and what's happening there.
So I think you are right. The future is the very individualized supplementation program. Now, another thing that's very individualized and everybody has their own is the gut microbiome. How do you test it? Why do you test it? And what do you learn from it?
Yeah, absolutely. All of this started with a high impact research study in the early 2010s, where they decided to perform genome sequencing on some stool sample. This was before the gut microbiome was discovered. And the scientists, I forget which group it was, were very surprised to find a lot of DNA in the stool. And they thought, is that just material from food that was eaten? They did a deeper look and they saw billions and billions of bacteria, different specimens. It's an insane calculation. There's 10 times more bacteria cells in your body than there are cells of you. And the reason that's even possible is because most bacteria cells are less than a tenth of the size of one of your cells. They're very, just making that make sense, bacteria cells are very small. But this was really shocking to everyone. It was all over the news. It made waves in the scientific community, and everyone was wondering, what did this mean? Further studies in metabolomics determined that, oh, your intestines don't just magically digest food. It's all of these billions of bacterial cells, not just bacterial cells, but you have viruses, you have fungal cells, you have protist cells, you have all kinds of cells in your gut that are actually actively interacting with food that's going through and metabolizing them and creating compounds for your health. And what we found further is that the way your microbiome interacts with your diet and the way your diet interacts with your microbiome, vice versa, has profound implications on your skin, your mental state, your longevity. It's really hard to find something where it doesn't have an impact. So essentially, it's not just about eating good food, but it's about eating good food consistently that support microbes that can actually process good food to maintain your energy, longevity, and health. And we do see that people who are lacking certain phyla, certain categories of bacteria, actually experience a lot more head fog, a lot more fatigue. Their skin doesn't regenerate to such a quality or degree. So you see people with skin issues, let alone just general fat deposits. And what we found is you actually have to invoke the presence of those bacteria by eating those particular foods like yogurts, sauerkraut, some fermented foods as well, some whole grains, some complex carbs. And you do need to be very careful about certain substances like alcohol that will damage the microbiome and that will remove things. So it's really just a deeper way of understanding. And at a BioAro level and with our operations, many other people have done this, as GI map is a great example. You can actually take a sample of an individual person's stool, shoot that in whole genome sequencing, in Illumina, or rather whole genome like shotgun sequencing, and you can determine based on the species that are present or not present, how this person's diet is going. And I think that is an issue in the dieting world for a lot of people is we all have our perceptions of how we're eating and our assumptions. What we find is even though someone looks very healthy, they actually might be experiencing fatigue and perhaps some internal issues because of their microbiome. If you are not 100% sure that your diet is completely optimized for your lifestyle, a gut microbiome is absolutely the way to go to scientifically prove. You say, maybe you're debating with your friends, you can say, hey, this says that I've got everything I need, it's all good. Or you could say, oh, I need to add a couple things or remove a couple things.
Absolutely. It's very interesting. And just to put it all together, I think you're one of the few companies that connects the healthcare testing and the AI analysis of the data directly with the supplementation.
Yes, absolutely. My CEO, Dr. Anmol Kapoor, he is a cardiologist by trade based out of Calgary in Canada. And the reason why he got involved in all of this in the first place is practicing as a cardiologist in Canada. He would see people randomly, spontaneously pass away during treatment. And this did not sit well with him, the concept of idiopathic heart failure. And then he dug deeper into that is why do most cardiologists just accept idiopathic heart failure? What does that come from? He realized that there was a genetic predisposition for that. And some people, if they exert themselves excessively, they can actually experience this and that there is a way to prevent it. This is what got Dr. Anmol Kapoor involved in all of this from the start. BioAro genetic testing. His wife, Raman Kapoor, is a dietitian by trade. She's amazing with all dietary nutrition questions. In fact, she even coaches me when we're doing events together. She convinced her husband, Dr. Animal Kapoor, to bring gut microbiome testing into the mix and said it's not enough just to have the DNA, because your lifestyle has such an impact on things, on how you can prevent or provoke issues. And so she really brought that into the mix. And moving forward, I think Dr. Kapoor is really a serial entrepreneur in that he is constantly inspired and always bringing new things out, but he is always mindful of linking everything together into one grand picture. And so him and his whole family fake the Longevity Plus, Cell Omega, Creatine. He convinced Raman Kapoor. She was a purist dietitian for a while, where she said, I don't think you need supplements if your diet is perfect. It's funny, there was a back and forth about that. And he convinced her. He said, no, try these. There's creatine monohydrate. There's NMN. There's things that are very hard to get in diet that you can use a supplement. And she tried it for a few months and succeeded her point that, wow, this really does make a difference. And part of joining the company is they sent them over to me and said, Brock, you've got to try these. I've tried creatine and some supplements over the years, some omega, and the amount of alertness, attention, awakeness, and even memory improvement I experienced was profound. It was extremely helpful. And I think this all is connected under this idea of Dr. Kapoor's intention to prevent death. Preventing death sounds very dramatic, but there's so many steps before that, because preventing death really means preventing aging. And preventing aging really means efforts into testing, diet, and supplementation. And so that's how that connects into the bigger picture of BioAro. And if you look at the Longevity Plus compounds, those are ones that have been very heavily studied in the literature. NMN, coenzyme Q10, curcumin. They're not just fads. There are a lot of supplements that are just fads and just hype train. It's really not the case with these. And it's all connected under this BioLongevity app. So if you out there are interested in your whole genome, your gut microbiome, other microbiome testing, your biomarkers, your diet, supplements, then all you have to go to is BioLongevity to get your answers.
What is BioAro planning on doing with all the data that you collect? And I don't mean that in a negative way. I actually mean that in a very positive way, because it's most valuable information that can teach us a lot about human lifespan and all that. How do you think BioAro can use that in the most effective way?
That is a great question. And it actually becomes very complicated very quickly, because generally, when we work directly with customers or with clinic partners in Canada, Latin America, US, and Europe, we say that we respect patient privacy at the core of our company. I mentioned that previously with the Vatra decentralized storage, and you mentioned that earlier, and that's a great point. So we have to be very careful with the data. My quick answer is it is safer just to leave the data be and not risk any breaching. And the issue is, if there are research projects and collaborations with organizations to do research, it becomes a pro and con, a beneficence challenge of maybe we can do this research with all this data and find great information that's going to help people further. But then the more you're sharing data, the more you're using data, the more risk there is of a breach. But essentially, we always go back to our patients, always go back to our customers. Patients are allowed to specifically request that you never share my data with anyone, even for research. So we're pretty clear with customers on that, just saying, hey, we are considering doing research in the future with organizations to improve health. If you don't want your data involved in that ever, if you just want it closed away from the entire universe, that's okay too. You can request that. And it's made very clear when we work with people, because our terms of service are very long. That's a tough one. It's research versus safety, right? It feels almost like a waste to close it away forever, but at the end of the day, that's not our choice. It's the patient's choice, and what they want goes ultimately.
I have to say, I find that quite impressive. I've spoken to a lot of and very respectable companies that use the data in an ethical way and for research purposes. As you said, might be safe at the moment. We don't know down the line how safe it will be. I find it very admirable.
Thank you.
That you are using the information and the data you gather purely to help the individual other than using it for research, which, as you said, has its benefits. It's using data in a different way.
Having worked in research for a number of years, the problem with research is that although the intention is very positive, research is never done alone, especially for complex problems and complex programs. In order to engage in patient research, you have to use programs, processing softwares, and resources from other companies and organizations. And they do their best to be safe about it. They'll sign waivers and contracts saying, hey, you can't use this data for anything. It's almost like when you have a secret and you tell your secret to one or two friends and they promise not to tell anyone. Maybe those researchers need the assistance of another person and it expands and becomes this thing and when research is done right, no issue even comes from that if everyone is contracting with each other properly and not, especially when you're blinding data. So they'll actually blind data and send it so that other collaborators have the values, but they don't have identities associated. But there have been breaches in the past, and it's absolutely a possibility. And so that's why we offer people the option to just say, lock my data away and never do anything with it. Just use it for my report, and that's it. And I appreciate that recognition. Thank you very much.
No, it's a very honorable approach. And you have to mention that because it's a very important, it's an issue.
One thing I did want to speak about as well was people were so impressed at our decentralization of data that we've actually formed our own subsidiary company, Vatra, to offer that service, B2C or B2B, to anyone else who actually wants to move into decentralized data storage services for cybersecurity, for data security. We've done that with the genome, but we also see an opportunity to help people with general business data. We can store terabytes and terabytes of data so that it's blockchain, chunked, and distributed into different servers amongst different countries. And you can also lock that to specific countries if that's your preference. So if anyone is interested in learning more about blockchain decentralized storage for businesses, for clinical settings, for individuals, actually we have a Vatra app for individuals. You can just download VAUTRA Vatra. To contact us at B2B scale, you can go on our website, Vatra, same spelling. So definitely want to mention that. And I think that I do see a huge future potential in that, especially with recent breaches in AWS. There are great cloud security organizations out there, but they're all centralized. So there's a great deal of risk. So we do see potential with Vatra and helping other clinical companies and other companies in general storing data. And then the biosport. So if you're a specific athlete, you're an athlete and you want to use genetic data for your training purposes, then go on thebiosport.com, sign on the wait list, and you'll get all of the information you need. And then take a look at BioLongevity.
Before we finish, I ask everyone 5 rapid fire questions. What's the single best piece of advice you would give your younger self?
Cut alcohol. I've never had a particular problem with alcohol. If you want to make one quick, decisive choice to improve your general health, cut alcohol.
Name one habit everyone should adopt for a longer, healthier life.
Ooh, stand up every 10 minutes. Unless you're sleeping, of course.
If you weren't in the longevity science, what career would you have chosen?
Probably venture capital finance, working for a startup company. It's really interesting to see how much power and potential venture capitalists and investors have. It's really their choice who makes it and who doesn't. They're the ones who get to decide. So finance venture capital.
Yeah, they do hold a magic wand. What microdose habit, a 5-minute routine, or small daily action yields outsized longevity benefits?
I would say meditation. 5-minute routine, 5-minute meditation. Longer could be better, but I think 5 minutes is great.
What's the craziest longevity myth you've encountered? And is there any truth to it?
Craziest longevity myth. I would say that red wine is good for you. That is the craziest longevity myth. And the only thing about it that is technically true if you separate it from the alcohol is, yes, the grapes are good for you, but the alcohol far outweighs the benefits of those grapes. No, sorry, red wine is not good for you. In fact, like I said, cutting alcohol is the easiest, quick decision you can make to improve your health consistently. And I do mean zero. Sorry.
Such is life. Thank you so much. That was really great.
Thank you so much.
That was Brooke from BioAro. This conversation makes one thing very clear. Beta testing on its own is not enough. The harder question is what you do with that information once you have it, how responsibly you use it, and how well you protect the person it came from. This episode explores an ambitious idea, bringing genetics, microbiome science, biomarkers, and targeted interventions together in a way that could make prevention far more personal. But it also raises a question this field cannot afford to ignore, which is whether progress in health data can happen without compromising privacy, consent, and trust. And that may prove to be one of the most important questions in this space. Not just how much we can know, but how carefully we choose to use it. If you've enjoyed this episode, please review and share.